A few years later, she sold the farm. "I want to go to the city. Leave all of this behind," she would say. I didn't blame her. I was glad to leave, but I admit I did miss the place once we were gone, and I know she did too. It was a quiet life, a fine life, but she couldn't stand to be in a house where memories ran rampant and hid in every corner and shadow, whispering to her, reminding her of my father. It was 1942. The world was at war, and I couldn't do anything but work building bits and pieces of guns and tanks. Being practically crippled, I was 4F. I could only hear about how all my friends that I'd grown up with went over to fight for liberty, came back in boxes. I suppose I was lucky on that part. My mother took up a job in the same munitions plant as me. Propaganda at its best, I suppose. It put a smile on her face, and that's all I needed to know. It was a good thing. We'd be living with her mother in Boston, and life was fine indeed. I liked my grandmother well enough, but she always looked at me like a leper. She saw too much of my father in me, I suppose. She hated him for what he did to my mother. The beatings were a secret, but she hated my father for taking my mother away. A soldier returns from war and knocks up a pretty young woman with a whole world in front of her. Steals her back to his home where the fruit of several steamy nights ends up dying in its sleep. My sister didn't get much of a chance at the world, but I sure did. She resented me for everything that I represented. A horny farmer turned soldier. It wasn't until I started bringing Claire around that she started to warm up to me. At least a little more. Maybe Granny was finally seeing I wasn't my father, or maybe she was just going senile. I don't know. I can't say that I didn't love Claire. She was a wonderful woman. But I do know that I saw a hell of a lot of Sandra in her. That blazing crimson hair of hers and those deep green eyes. Maybe it was me mourning for a love long lost, or guilt for never stealing Sandra away from her life. 6 feet of rope. Funny how something so seemingly average could remove someone from your life. I loved Sandra. I did. And so did her daddy. A little too much. She was probably praying that I'd come home to her window at night and steal her away like Romeo and Juliet. She had something inside of her. Something horrible. Something God forgot about. She wanted it to be something beautiful, and I could never be as such. Poor Sandra. God rest her soul. I loved her. But I loved Claire, too. Maybe not on the truly bottomless romantic way, but I loved her all the same. Claire and I were married at a lovely ceremony in 1945. The war was over, our boys were coming home, and the world began to get even more scared of itself. The Reds were everywhere, they started saying. I don't know. Men were men, but it's their toys that always ended up hurting them. I found work as a mechanic. Claire was teaching. Money was tight, but we didn't complain. We had an apartment to live in, and each other. We didn't need to worry about much else, until one day I got home from the shop, and she was waiting for me. "Hey, sweetheart," I cooed her. I cooed in her ear as I kissed the back of her neck like I always did when I got home. "I'm late." "What?" "I'm late." "I don't know what you mean." She took my hand and placed it on her belly. It all hit me like a ton of bricks. "You mean—" "Yes." She was trying to hold back her tears and smile, but they broke through anyway. "I gonna be—" "Uh-huh." My son was born December 20th, 1949. The most beautiful baby boy that I have ever saw. William Hudson Bronson. He took after me, just as I had taken after my father, and I was determined to make him have all the things that I never could. But money was tight before, and It wasn't getting any better. My grandmother had died 2 years prior to the birth, and my mother was living all alone, but she delighted in seeing her little Billy B, as she called him, over whenever we dropped by. She loved him with all of her might, and I did me as well to see her happy. Billy had just turned 1 when I got the news that our old home was back on the market. My mother handed me a check that had all the money that she had been saving over the last 10 years, and she told me it would be good to go home, return to my roots, and raise Billy like I had been raised. Well, I didn't think that was such a good idea. I just knew those memories would be waiting for me there, hiding in the shadows, waiting for me to let my guard down so they could strangle me. Any ghosts in that house have long since left, my mother said to me. It was a good life. I know that life was hard, very hard at times, but it's in your blood, Daniel. You don't like being a mechanic, do you? Haven't you been aching to go back to the land? Watch the fruits of your work pay off? I did. I did miss the farm life, but I didn't know how much I missed my farm life. We left Billy with my mother, while Claire and I made our way back to my childhood home. The town had grown quite a bit, everything a modern family would need. When we finally did reach the old farm, my eyes fell on the barn, and a deep chill ran through me. You okay? Claire asked me in that sweet, concerning voice of hers. Goose walked over my grave, I suppose. The man who owned it most recently was a rich yuppie who thought about trying his hand at farm life. Couldn't live without the amenities of the modern man. Fully wired, plumbing, plenty of farming equipment, and a completely new paint job and decor. It wasn't my home anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. After our tour, Claire got into the car and instantly spilled out her opinion. We need to buy this house. You really think so? I do. I can work at school in town. You can make a living here, growing corn, raising cows, doing whatever it is that farmers do. You really want to live here? I questioned. I did want to come back, but there was too much in my head screaming at me not to come back. Yes. She stared at me intently. She knew that I would crack, like always. She had that special kind of power over me. Then it settled. It's ours. We settled in and got our new life off to a good start. The land was good, the crops grew like weeds, and Billy was taking a liking to the open air. It wasn't much longer after our first harvest that Claire was late once more. We had our baby girl, Esther May Bronson, in the summer of 1953. She took after her mother in spades, a slice of the American dream. I found myself walking out to the railroad tracks every now and then. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe it was sort of my way of trying to make sense of something so unbelievable. I never told anyone, never once. The devil and his hellbound train were my secret to keep. I wasn't crazy. I prayed to God that I wasn't crazy. Sometimes, late at night, I hear a train whistle piercing out in the night. The slow chug, 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 pushing the metal beasts along those endless steel tracks. Sometimes I swear, just under those whistles, I could hear screams. We led a fine life indeed. Billy was growing into a man before my very eyes, and Esther was blossoming into a beautiful young woman more and more every day. It was 1968. Another war was going on halfway around the world, but it didn't bother me none, because till Billy came to me and said that he was going to join the army. He wanted to be fighting for his country, and Claire had a fit, as expected, but he had his mind set, and he was damned if anybody was going to change his mind. We got his letters every week, and every week we'd write back. I was sleeping. It came again, the first time in years. My father standing over me holding his shovel, his eyes burning orange like coal, the shovel coming down on me before the scene melted away, and I'm with Sandra. My loving, rotting Sandra in the hayloft, exposing herself to me in a morbid yet sexually exciting manner. You love me, don't you, Daniel? You know I do. Her rotting lips formed a smile. Her gaping maw opened to reveal an unimaginable darkness. From the darkness came a low whistle, slowly building into a deafening scream. I woke up. Sweating bullets and soaking my nightshirt and pants. I didn't have to use the bathroom. It was the whistle. Cutting out into the night, calling me like a sailor to the rocks. I silently slipped from the bed and down the stairs, each step creaking slightly under my weight. I slipped on my shoes, flung the front door open, and started running. The wind chilled me slightly in the autumn night air. My mind raced with the memories reaching out. Not from the corners and shadows of my home, but from my mind, reaching out, trying to hold me down and suffocate me. It was the same as it was all those years ago, the smoke plumed from the engine, falling to the ground and lingering like a thick black fog. The deep black metal glared back at me as I walked along the side of the great beast. The devil stood outside of a car, watching me as I approached, his eyes burning brightly with excitement. Diamond, pearl, opal, and jade. Danny boy has come back. Still no ticket, I see. His voice shuddered through me, but I pressed on. Why are you here? Oh, my, Danny boy. We all have a job to do, and this is my job. But why are you here? In that moment, I heard my father sneaking into my voice, a calm and quiet anger. Dad? A voice from inside the car rang out like a bell. Out of the open hallway stepped my son, Billy, clad in his official army gear, and looking quite confused. Dad! Billy. The word got caught in my throat. I ran over and held him close to me, never wanting to let him go. Billy, why are you on this train? I don't know. I remember my squad was walking through the jungle, and then there was this white flash, and I woke up on the train. What are you doing here? I don't quite know myself. I smiled lightly. I squeezed him tighter. It's good to see you, boy. How touching, the devil spoke up. You have 5 minutes, Billy boy. The devil stepped into the car and made his way to the engine. Once I knew he was gone, I grabbed Billy's hand and tried to pull him away. Come on, son, we need to get you home. He pulled away from me. No! Billy, Dad, if this is what everyone else on here is saying, then I can't leave. I can't, Dad. We can go home right now. Tell your mother you're home, and no. I belong here, and who knows, maybe this train doesn't just go to hell. Maybe it makes stops off somewhere else. I don't know. Billy, Daddy, I heard from friends of mine who went home. They got problems, Daddy. I'd rather be dead than mangled up and fucked up in the head. Sorry for cursing. It's okay, son. We stood silently for a long moment, staring at each other, trying to think of the words to say. All aboard! I love you. I love you. Goodbye. The black metal behemoth pulled away from me once more, screaming down those endless steel tracks. I waved goodbye to my son, long after the train was out of sight. Even after its screaming whine disappeared from the night air, I watched. I prayed. Just like every week we got another letter. Only this time it wasn't from Billy. Claire was wrecked. She wouldn't leave the house for days, laying around, crying, wailing that she should have kept him here, kept him safe. She left me not more than a year after that, said that she couldn't stand looking at me and seeing Billy. I also know she hated me. I couldn't join her in her sorrow, in her pain. I got to say my goodbye. I got my closure. I don't blame her for hating me. But to take my daughter away from me was just cruel punishment. I haven't seen either in years. Many, many years. I did the best I could. I tried to live life as best I could with what I had. I was a good father. I was a good son. I was a good husband. None of that means a hill of beans in the long run, though. We all end up in the cold, hard earth, feeding the maggots and creepy crawlies that haunt our nightmares. I can hear it now. The screaming. The screaming in the darkness, calling out to me. I've seen a lot of things in my life. Some things I'm more proud of than others. As a boy, nothing could sate my appetite for the world around me. I suppose that there's just one last thing to figure out. The train is out there. And I finally got my ticket. The only thing left to do is to take a ride.